So, as I was saying, how do you want me to introduce you?
Oh, I have no idea. Just my name is fine. And uh, I've no idea, Ash. I don't know. I practice, what can I say? I practice martial arts, specifically Xingyiquan, since I was a teenager. It's still a challenge to try to understand the depths of the arts, and still, when Sifu Sam wrote to me and said, "We are interviewing masters," I just laughed because I'm so far from that.
Right. Well,
I'm a practitioner. I practice and I teach a few guys because I want to have people to practice with, and I write books. That's it. Yeah.
right. How many books have you written so far?
A few books, maybe 7 or 8 books. But I'm never. As soon as they're written, I realize they're out of date. To do with my thinking now is very different to what it was 5 or 10 years ago. So I've just written another book. It's called Obvious, Hidden, and Transformed. Obvious, Hidden, and Transformed Power in Xingyiquan and Baguazhang. So that's kind of bringing my thinking up to its current written state, but it's already out of date because I wrote it about 6 months ago. So yeah, you know how it is. You practice yourself every day, I'm sure. So you discover things and you realize how much is lacking, and it's something. You see the teacher, you see the ability of somebody that you train with, and it pulls you forward, right? And you try to understand how they're doing it. But so yeah, that's what the writing is explaining where I'm at that moment, basically to myself, and then putting it down in a book. Yeah.
Well, that's sort of the.
But no classics. No classics. I've never looked at something I've written and thought this is equivalent to one of no way. But maybe when I'm 80, I will do that. Yeah.
Well, I mean that's the limitations of the written word, right? Whereas like our understanding of a particular topic is a continuously moving target. I mean, just like
yes,
what
sure.
they say in Zen, right? It's like you can never step in the same running water twice. So it's like even if the water was the same, you'd be different.
Yes,
so
sure. Yeah.
So I was also under the impression that you had some Tai Chi background, but you just consider yourself mostly a Xingyi and Bagua?
Yeah, the Tai Chi Chuan is very limited. I lived in Taiwan with a master called Chen Yun-sun. Exceptionally good fighter, mainly Tai Chi Chuan. And he learned from an old Taoist called Liu Peichong, who's the head of the Kunlun Taoist sect in Taiwan. And Master Chen is a brilliant fighter. He was like a teacher of the bodyguards of the president, very scary and dangerous guy. But I mainly did Tai Chi Chuan with him because I was in the class in the mornings, in the early mornings, and the Qigong. But mainly we worked on Xingyi Chuan, Buddhist cultivation, some of the traditional medicine. And I did the Tai Chi Chuan kind of under duress. I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and I was, I kept saying to him, I really want to do a Xingyi and Bagua with you, because he had learned from people like Wang Shujin and Chen Panling. And he said, just do the Tai Chi Chuan as well, because later you'll understand how valuable it is. And in the last few years, now I'm in my 50s, I kind of understand. I've only started practicing it more because people ask me to learn it. and I'm teaching. There's 3 guys that study it. 2 of them are teachers, Tai Chi teachers. So the Tai Chi Chuan is technically quite different from the other Tai Chi I've seen. There's more, for example, the Peng, what people call Peng in Tai Chi Chuan, we call Bing, which the word in Chinese translation, it means you know, in the horseback archer, he carries like a quiver case on his back with the arrows, and the lid of the case, that action is called Bing, and it means to raise up and then immediately cover. So the idea of the Bing is you raise somebody center up and immediately you strike down. So for example, that's quite different from Peng, you know, what people call Peng in Tai Chi Chuan, which is the energy. It's the energy. Even Sifu talks about this, Sifu Sam, right? The energy of Peng, or he has his own term for it. I can't remember exactly what he calls it. Yeah,
fullness.
Exactly. Yeah, the fullness. But that's, whereas the Bing Lu Ji An, Bing is like a technical striking action or throwing action, mainly striking action. So the Tai Chi Chuan from Liu Pei Chong is quite different from what I've seen in the West as typical Yang style or Wu style. So I don't do very much Tai Chi Chuan at all, but recently, last few years, I've been teaching it. So I have practiced, dredged up what I learned from Master Chen and practiced, but mainly Xingyi Bagua, yeah.
How long did you live in Taiwan?
I was in Asia altogether just over 9 years, adding all the places up, but Taiwan was several years. And then Southeast Asia a few years. I was in Hong Kong a couple of years and mainland China. But I lived with Master Chen from about 1996 to about 2002 on and off. So every time I would stay in Taiwan for several months, living with his family, which was brilliant opportunity. And then through him, I got to meet lots of other people. He knew a lot of people in Taiwan. So I'm not sure you've been to Taiwan, but it's a fantastic place for traditional Chinese culture. They really respect the old things. But he was, I think he's about 70 now. So he was from that generation that are now starting to get very old. And living with a teacher is a very, it can sound romantic, but it can be really, really tough, really difficult. But it was great, fantastic experience. He was also teaching a lot of Buddhist cultivation. He used to go to temples and give lectures. He was a layperson, is a layperson, but a lot of monks seemed to respect him. But a very unusual character, old school, you know. So I stayed with his family on and off for some years. Yeah.
Yeah, Taiwan it's on my bucket list, but I haven't made it yet. And my understanding is quite different than the mainland.
Very different. Yeah.
So, what brought you to Asia in the first place?
When I was 12, I moved back from, I grew up in Africa. I moved back. There was a war in Africa, so my dad and my mum lost everything. He was involved in politics. We had to leave everything in the space of a few days. We had to flee back to Britain. And then basically they lost everything. So we ended up in a very rough place, extremely rough place in the 70s. In Britain, and then I got bullied. The long story short, I got very badly bullied. My street was full up with very heavy people, so I got badly bullied from the age of 12 to about 15, 16. And my mum put me in a karate school. Then I went to London, looking for a teacher because I'd seen, David Carradine and Monkey Magic and all these kind of things. I felt this pull towards Buddhism, towards Chinese martial art. And my karate teacher was a Burmese gentleman, and he said, you have to go to China. If you want that, you have to go to China. So I found a teacher in in London. Actually, three brothers. They practiced Shaolin Lohan. Brilliant fighters. They ended up working as bodyguards, very high-level bodyguard, and so on. And to this day, they are probably the best real fighters I've met. If you talk about just real street fighting and dangerous situations, they were up there with the best. And then I ended up going to Hong Kong for a short time with the brother that was my teacher, and got the bug because I wanted to learn from the source. Then I come back to England. I worked for a few years, and then in my 20s I went back, Taiwan, Hong Kong, mainland China, started looking around, and met Chen Yun-sun. And then in 1999 I met He Jinghan. He's a Bagua master. And also met a Xingyiquan master who is he's very unknown in Taiwan, but brilliant fighter and teacher. And I studied with him. That was a big changing point in practice because he taught me. He was the first one to really talk about nei gong for power, like doing specific exercises to develop internal power. So that period, it was very short, but it was a breakthrough period. Yeah, so that's how I got involved, was through being bullied and then seeing, these kind of archetypal things. You remember David Carradine's Kung Fu series, the Monkey Magic series. I'm not sure you saw that one, the old Japanese one, but that was...
No, the Monkey Magic one I'm not familiar with, but David Carradine, of course, Kung Fu.
Yeah. So they were archetypal, kind of Buddhist martial art combination things that I just knew from a young age, this is it, this is what I want to do. And so I went to Hong Kong, Taiwan when I was 16, just for a short time, and then that was it. I was, but I didn't have the money to stay out there, so I come back and then had to work for a few years, and then as I got older, I got more money, started working, teaching, and it was easier. Then I could travel a lot more.
Were you teaching English while you were there? Is that what you were?
No, well, I did in Taiwan for about 2 years, but very short time, just for a couple of years. And I was really lucky. I struck it lucky. I was teaching the president of a bank, so I could teach like 6 hours a week and make enough to live on. But then I started teaching. I come back for about 2 months every 6 months and taught in England. And just that time, I had a lot of students. Went back and could just train. I didn't have to work, so that was quite good.
When you would go back to England, you were teaching martial arts.
Yeah, mainly Bagua Xingyi.
Okay. So let's go back a little bit. Tell me more about the Neigong exercises that you got interested in, and how, like, what exactly about that changed your perspective?
Yeah, that was like with Master Chen. Master Chen's brilliant. We fought a lot. He's a brilliant fighter, technically very good. But he wasn't the kind of teacher that would give you A, B, C, D. So you had to work out things. If you asked him a question, you'd get hit or thrown or swept. And then you had to work out, and he would say things, but they were often very obscure. I don't know if you've met teachers like this, but they were, like classical things. And I didn't have the understanding at that time. So a lot of it was still very shrouded in mystery. How on earth did this small guy manage to have such hidden power, such good power? So when I met this Xingyiquan teacher in the park, and the first thing he had me doing was working with a very heavy spear. And this spear was about 12 foot long. So it was very heavy, very thick. Lanaja, the basic Xingyiquan, and some other exercises. So that was 1 hour before we did anything else. And then it was 2 or 3 hours of individual exercises, just very simple exercises, but with a lot of detail. What does your hip joints do? What do your shoulder joints do? What does your spine do? What's the connection between the feet and the hands? What's the timing? Extremely precise. And for me, this was, must have been 98, 99. So that was the first thing that, then I realized, okay, the level in Taiwan there was still very, very good level of people. Like Master Chen was brilliant, but I didn't get the specific details at that time. Then this Xingyi teacher gave me detail. Then I met He Jinghan in the next year, and he gave me equally precise detail for Bagua, like extremely precise. You would go away from a 3 or 4 hour training, your mind would be boggling, and enough you could write a whole notebook. So the problem there was that it took a long time to be able to do what he was talking about. But at least I had the understanding, the clarity of the body mechanics, that this isn't just like, whereas with Master Chen, he would often talk about qi and fajin, but he wouldn't tell you how to do it. So with these teachers, you would get the specific body mechanics. Yeah.
Yeah, not just the what and the why, but the how.
Yeah, exactly, and really precise. And then it's up to the student. Are you willing to put the hours in? And even then, it's difficult, right? You have to be able to do it. But yeah, so the precision is very important. And then I don't know if you found this with practice, but it goes in cycles and phases. Yes, cycles. Like you'll have a few months you feel you really don't understand anything, and suddenly it will break through. And like you might feel a connection from your elbow to your shoulder after many months of practice. So you get one piece of the puzzle. I think you understand what I mean by this, right? You get one piece of the puzzle, and then you realize, wow, that was amazing, but it's just one piece. And then wow, how does that fit in with, the knee to the hip, for example, because they're connected. So for me, it's been a process like 30, 40 years of slowly finding pieces, like mechanical pieces, energetic pieces, even spiritual pieces, and then trying to work out how it all fits into one thing. And eventually it becomes extremely simple. You go from all of this complexity that I had 20 years ago, and now all of that's gone. It's extremely simple. It's just one thing. And that one thing I can't explain. Nobody can explain it. And if you have a glimpse of it, it makes sense of all the little pieces.
I think
but you cannot, yeah.
No, I was going to say, I think that
or write about it because it's too simple. That's where all the complexity comes. Then you have to explain it because, these teachers, they're not thinking about all the detail. They're just doing it. But they can't teach it like that because the student just looks with a baffled look going, what are you talking about? So then they start talking and they end up talking for hours and weeks and months and, like Zen, right? The real Zen masters, they'll just give you a cup of tea or just shout or ignore you because there's nothing you cannot tell somebody that thing, but you have to. That's the paradox.
It's beyond words.
Yeah.
I think my experience is somewhat the reverse of yours, but ends up at the same place where I think I understand it, and then I break through to another level and I'm like, oh, I didn't understand that at all. But then you keep continuing. But yeah, it's like in the beginning, it's like so very technical in its way. But then at the end you realize, oh, it's all just one thing, right? Just one feel and then also, like you say too, where it's like, my experience with Sifu Grandmaster Sam Chen, where he says, "Oh, why so hard? It's just like this. It's so simple, right?" And you're like, "Ah, can't. It's not that simple. It's not simple." And then like after a while, then like the light bulb starts to go off, and you're like, "Oh, wait a minute. It's so simple. Why so?" then you repeat the same experience with with your own students or the people that are training you. You're like, I'm already
Right,
telling you, it's just open or
right,
close. Um,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
And you realize that Sifu Sam's not joking. He's not just trying to be cool or clever. It's just, this is very simple. Yeah. And I remember about probably 2 or 3 years ago, I had a period. I felt really sick and tired of all the stuff, all of it, all the complexity, all the techniques, all the philosophy, the religions, everything. I remember very clearly just feeling it's all meaningless, no point. And of course, it didn't last because you come back and you do stuff again. But after that, there was a different clarity that, wow, it really is simple. And we mess it up. We mess it up with all the thinking, all the different methods. We don't need a lot of methods. The less we do, the better. That's my present understanding. The less we do, the better. But we only need one or two things, but those should be good.
deep. Like
Yeah, real. And that's
go in
already
depth
difficult.
rather
It's
than
just, yeah. Just to be an honest person, for example. All of these. I had libraries of books of religion, spirituality, Buddhism, and went to thousands of teachings, and in the end, none of it means anything, because when you're acting from what's the word, integrity or honesty, and when you're not, and that's what it comes down to. Are you being honest with yourself, with the world, or not? That's it. And who can do that? And if we can't do that, what about all this other stuff is meaningless,
right, right. So let's back up a little bit. So I think, like a lot of people, I mean, almost everybody that I've spoken with so far, they all said the same thing, that they started with karate, and then eventually moved on to other arts. Now, again, this is just your perspective, your own experience and opinion. So, you know, we can all take that with a grain of salt. But in your experience, are there any teachers out there that are teaching with this sort of depth that I think, and just in my opinion, and I've never done karate, so, I don't have any particular bias in this particular discussion, but I would imagine that if you trained with the right teacher and for long enough, that they're going to have all the same insights, especially considering that like the Okinawan karate has roots in the Fujian white crane. So, in your opinion, are there teachers out there that are that have the secrets, right? That what we would call like internal power, and where are they? How, who's teaching it?
Yeah, I think I haven't been to Japan. I'd love to go there, but I've seen like video of some Japanese teachers, like the swordsman Tetsukan. Have you seen this gentleman? He's a very famous sword master, kenjutsu master.
Is he the one that Chris
when I
Crudelli
watched,
had? Is he the one that Chris Crudelli had
but
on?
there's a lot of Kuroda. That's it, exactly. I mean, he's obviously exceptionally high level, right? And also his philosophy, his thinking, if you listen to him, extremely deep and fearsome. I mean, you would have to be super, super skilled to go against somebody like that with a weapon. So that was one thing. I remember watching him many, many years ago, and a Japanese friend of mine translating his interviews and thinking, wow, this person is extremely deep. And then the Kotori Shintoryu, Otake Sensei, people like that. And then some years ago, I met a Kotori Shintoryu teacher in where I live in Britain. And I took some lessons for a while until the COVID thing. And this man had very, very good use of angulation, timing, just from the Kenjutsu, the Katori Shintoryu. Equally good as most Chinese weapon, if not better. And I think he's trained like 20 years. So you can imagine there's people 40, 50, 60 years training. And I started to think from that, it doesn't matter about Japanese, Indonesian, Chinese. It really doesn't matter. It matters how real the practice is. Have you had, like this guy had done a lot of testing, the historical European martial art testing, where they put on armor and then they try. So his understanding of timing, distance was really, really good. But to answer your question, I totally don't think it matters the country of origin, and there must be brilliant, very exceptionally skilled Japanese people. Because at the end of the day, a punch you can do it very mechanically and externally, or you can do it with lots of content, right? You can do it with twist, spiral force, pulling back power, rooting, intention, six harmony, coordination. That's not limited to Chinese systems.
Well, that's a lot like Sifu says, say, I don't care what kind of punch you do, like Xingyi, Taiji, Bakwa, like who punches? You punch.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that in one of my previous discussions with Hapkido master Mike Dunchak, and one of the things that we were discussing was that it seems like if you practice long enough, it doesn't matter what art you're practicing, everybody kind of comes to the same realizations, about how the body works, and this is the way that the mind works, this is the way the body works, this is the way the interaction between two bodies in space work. We're sort of all under the same blanket set of rules, that are determined by physics and the environment.
Exactly. Yeah. And because it's simple, because we all have a center. We have our center, which is the same for everybody. We have the mind, which is the same. We have four limbs, which is the same. So how many different, you can only really separate the arts into arts that damage your body and arts that keep your body healthy. And I would say if any of them that keep your body healthy can be equally effective or equally good for you or profound. And at the end of the day, Ash, it's you are on a journey through life. I'm on a journey through life, right? Sifu Sam is on a journey through life. And we're not doing the system that we call it, Ilikchuan or Xingyiquan. When somebody meets us, what they're seeing is the result of all of those things that you've experienced, right? Just a convenient term is Ilikchuan or Xingyiquan. Do you understand what I mean? It's not. It's your whole life. You are bringing your whole life when you do your butterfly form or your spinning hands. But the box for teaching, of course, the box is called Zhong Xingdao or Ilikchuan. That's the box. But in reality, you're something vast, unlimited.
Right.
So
again, like Sifu says about, don't train the system, use the system to train yourself.
Right. But we still respect the system at the same time. We still revere the ancestors and respect the lineage, because that's like our parents. We love our parents, but we're more than our parents, right? We are a unique person.
Right. So do me a favor and let's talk about some of the books that you've written so far. I know that you said that you feel like they're already out of date by the time they're published, but each of them, I think, would still have some value as a snapshot of your understanding at that time, right? And so, people. So basically, like again, like with your books, right? So from my own experience. So the first time that Sifu had sent me out to do a workshop somewhere, I went to New Mexico to do my first Ilichuan workshop, like on the road. And I was pretty nervous about the whole thing. And but then when I got there, like as soon as I touched hands with some of the people, right, or started to work with them, I immediately was relieved of all of that burden. My thought internally was, oh, okay, well, I'm not where I want to be, but I can help you, right? Like I haven't finished the path, right? But I'm far enough along that I can help you up to where I'm at now, right? And then we can go forward together from there. And I think probably the value of, let's say, your books would be quite the same, that even though you would feel that, okay, they're already out of date by the time they go to print, as a snapshot of your understanding at that time, it still has some value to help bring somebody forward from where they're at on their learning process to that point, and then you can go forward from there. So let's talk about some of the books that you've written.
Okay, just pause 1 second. I will grab one to show you. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna just pause just for a second. I'll be right back.
Okay, no worries.
Okay.
Okay, this book is called, it's a small book. It's only 90 something pages, but I wrote this, I guess, a few years ago. It's called Negong for Martial Power. And the subtitle is Cultivation and Fighting Strategy of Song Family Xingyiquan. So I met my Song Family Xingyiquan teacher many, I guess almost 20 years ago, but he didn't practice. He practiced with some Hong Kong teacher at the time. And then a few years later, he started to study Song Family Xingyiquan with the Grandmaster in China. And then I spent from, I guess, 2009, 2008 to now learning Song Family. So Song Family Xingyiquan is based on this set of scrolls. They're called the Negong Sejing, 4 classics of inner power or inner cultivation. So this book is basically giving a translation and commentary on these scrolls. And the reason I wanted to mention this, since you asked me about books, so these scrolls are used by many Northern Chinese martial arts schools to guide the practice. So they're very, like a lot of classics in Chinese martial art, they're very short, little phrases. And then you've got to kind of figure out what on earth is this talking about. But if I just tell you read you the first paragraph, if it's okay. So you Absolutely. Get a flavor of, okay. So this is the first paragraph of the book. It says, real knowledge of Negong requires a thorough understanding of the vessels and channels. You must understand this first, or else you will do yourself harm. It would be like practicing archery without a bow. The Renmai conception channel in the front and the Dumai governor channel in the back have a continuous flow of qi running through them. Okay, that's the opening couple of sentences. So this is a book that many of the great Xingyi Bagua fighters follow. So you think, wow, that's a very unusual opening for a fighting manual, right? Talking about the channels in the body. But it kind of gives you the like in your system, the yin and yang meridian channels, the yin and yang system, isn't it? Is fundamental to doing the practice correctly. If you don't have that, you're not doing Zhongxing Dao or Yilichuan, because you have the Renmai, Dumai channel, the yin yang channels, and you have the center. That is the essence. So this whole book really then goes on, talks about lots of different detail of Neigong and fighting strategy and stuff, but that is the very opening, and in the opening is the most important. So this whole little book is about, and there's lots of photos of the old masters, some of the old Song Family masters, talking about that tradition as well, why it was so revered amongst fighters, the really good fighters in North China. So this is something that I still think is of value, this book, because it's based on hundreds-year-old classics, not my, just my understanding. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's pause here and expand on some of that a little bit, because actually I think you've touched on something that's interesting as far as, let's just say, the Chinese language goes. And in particular, a lot of the classics, where, so one example that I'm thinking of recently, that I was having a discussion with one of my training brothers on, Jeff Wong. We were talking about the 5-character secrets from Lucha, and just how much variation there is in the potential interpretations of the 5-character secrets, right? In any, or even just say that the name, right, of Yilichuan. If I'm out and about and I go to one of the local Asian markets or something, and people are asking me, about, they say, oh, Yilichuan, and then, they're trying to get a sense of the art, like based on the name, but the potential interpretation of the characters, even to a native Chinese speaker, of the characters Yi, Li, Chuan, compared to, how Sifu uses the sense of Yi as awareness, right? More than, whereas like a lot of other arts might interpret Yi to be like the intent or will, right? It's a sort of, which both are correct, right? But from a more typical interpretation of the character Yi, right, as intent, is completely different than, right? Because that's like a mental formation compared to how Sifu usually discuss of the mind is, like the true nature of the mind is being more as formless. So, and that's sort of, so you're familiar, I'm sure, with some of the theory around how the language that
Yes.
you use, right, and the language that you speak shapes the way that you think, even, and the way that you see the world, right? And just again, with all this sort of, like, in the Chinese language, I know a little bit, but I wouldn't say that I speak Chinese, but it seems like there's just so much that goes unsaid, right? There's a lot of like assumptions or interpretations or that go like between the lines, right? You have to be able to read between the lines, and that's sort of been some of my experience too with a lot of the Chinese speakers sometimes, where it's like hard to get a straight answer almost from the way that we would think, in the West. And so what do you think basically on that subject of how does that has that shaped Chinese martial arts in particular, and how the arts are passed on, and a lot of the controversies that you have that happen online between different branches even of the same system that no, you're not interpreting that the
It's a huge subject. I mean, you could talk for weeks just about this, but the first thing to come back to is a word is like a container for meaning, right? So, intention, mind, spirit, what is it? So you have to, between the student and teacher, you have to have a shared understanding. You have to agree upon a meaning. It doesn't matter what the next school thinks, because they can argue with you all they want. But if you and your teacher understand that, what is in that container, like if I give you a teacup and then you drink it and you say, wow, that was great pu'er tea. And I say, that was great pu'er tea, Ash, wasn't it? And the people down the road are telling you that's jasmine tea. Well, they can talk all they want, but you know what it was. So that is what the part of the job of especially these Chinese teachers, I'm sure Japanese is the same, is honestly, the Western teachers in the West that didn't have contact with Asian teachers, they are one step removed from understanding what is the meaning in the container. It doesn't mean they can't fight, they don't move properly, but we know the language is important for transmitting ideas, isn't it, the meaning. But more important is the, like Sifu Sam says, if I whack you, you understand, right? So, to his really close students, he'll whack you, isn't it? Then you know. There's no, you know what I mean? You don't have to.
There's no more
meaning. You felt it. Yeah, you felt it, you understand in that moment. It might take you a long time to be able to do it, but you understand. And then if he tells you, this is from the classic, this is how I did it, then it has added meaning. So that's one thing, is that what is inside you have to understand with your teacher, have an agreement. So this book, for example, I sat down over the course of many years with Gordon So, who taught me Song Family Xingyiquan. He helped me to understand the meaning, the technical meaning. And then another Xingyiquan, a Song Family teacher, helped me to understand the classical meaning of the words. And it's very different to what I could have imagined. I couldn't have guessed the meaning, because there's this is hundreds of years old, these classics. A lot of the meaning is so archaic, like based on poetry or stories that no longer exist or no longer are in common use. You understand what I mean by that? So the very meaning of it is lost, unless somebody with that knowledge of the classical poetry or trying to think of an example.
Well, I'll give you an example right here. I was just going to say, I'll give you an example right from, it just happened to be discussing something with my youngest son last night, and he just said, oh, well, the proof is in the pudding, whatever that's supposed to mean, right? It's like, as language progresses, it's like a lot of these older phrases that, like, to us are like, oh, we take it for granted that we understand, the intent behind the phrase. But like some of these kids that are coming up now, that they're, the phrases aren't really in common use anymore, and they don't get the sense of it. So I mean, it's just sort of like that evolution of language that that's normal. So
yeah, absolutely. Like, we hardly use the word pudding, right? So even that word is like, well, the proof's in the pudding. It could be an airplane. Oh, there's a pudding in an airplane. So yeah, right. There's the whole.
Well, or even it's like, you're a native English speaker, I'm a native English speaker, but when you say pudding and I say pudding, actually means two different desserts.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So yes, there's the first thing is we have to agree on a shared understanding of the terminology in order to benefit from any of these classics, because it's not about like my understanding's better than their understanding. No, just use that understanding of the classics to push forward your practice. Then it's useful. And we're not Chinese. We don't have deep understanding of it. So we can benefit by sitting, listening to these, like Sifu Sam, he's native Chinese speaker, right? Even more difficult for Malaysian because they have Teju, Hakka, Fujian, Malay, 5, 6 different language. That's a whole nother thing. I tell you, language I really like is Malay and Singaporean. When you hear them mixing 4, 5, and plus English, they mix it all together. It's so beautiful. And so many phrases that, are just so obscure, and they will laugh about it even amongst themselves. But anyway, to get back to the classic, is I was with, in Taiwan, there's a shop and a publishing company called Lion Books. And they published lots of great Chinese martial art books. And then I was with the head of this Lion Books and Master He Jinghan. And we were there, and somebody had a copy of the best-selling British translation of Tai Chi Chuan Classic. I won't go into the author or anything like that, but it's very, very famous translator. And they were looking at it, and they were looking bewildered, sad, laughing, and they were saying almost every other sentence was wrong. Not because the translation was incorrect, but the guy had totally not understood the cultural background of what the imagery was about. A lot of it is imagery, metaphor. That is so obscure. It's like, oh, it's from this story back in the Tang Dynasty, but everybody knows it, but they don't have to think about it because it's, it's like having say a rock star that only, you're Latvian, and only in Latvia this rock star is huge. And then you try talking about it in Hong Kong, and people are going, I've never heard of this. So you have no frame of reference.
Right.
So the long and the short, if you study with someone a native speaker who's also very accomplished in practice, that is your best hope. If you just pick up a translation, it's difficult. You can go wrong, especially, I say the translations, take those with a pinch of salt, because they could be very wrong, and then you're really off. You're really far off, and you waste time. That's why I say, all you need is 1 or 2 verses that can last you for years and years of practice, right? Like your 5 characters, you were saying.
Yeah, or the other example would just be like picking up a good copy of the Lao Tzu, and the same book I would read completely different now after having 20 years of Yilichuan experience, and like my reference of yin yang being different, or full and empty being different, full hard and soft being different now compared to when I would have read that same book 20 years ago. It's like with the within the context of my experience with Yilichuan, it's like I read the same book completely differently now, like how you would interpret a lot of those passages. So now as we're
like
getting ready
Sutra.
Right, as we're getting ready to wrap up, so I always like to ask 2 sort of off the wall questions of my guests, and because I always find that actually I get some of the most interesting answers out of these 2 questions here. But the first one is, if you could go back, like, what do you wish that you knew then that you know now?
Back to before I started practice.
Correct. Right. When you first started practicing, what do you wish that you knew then that you know now, that would have saved you a lot of time and effort or heartache?
Oh, that's a very good question. With hindsight, I would have not, there's many things I wouldn't have spent time doing, just that. And I would have spent all my time on what I now know is important, just that. I won't go into detail because just the principle. Yeah, and people and things and events and places, but you cannot do that when you're going forward, right? You can only
Right.
see it
Right.
looking back.
But I mean, I think for me, the sort of the point of this question is to try and capture like a pearl of wisdom for the next generation coming forward, right? That so if for those with ears to hear, that would save them the same trials and
Well,
tribulations,
okay,
right?
okay. Then the single most important thing would be really take time to find a teacher, even if it's years. And I heard this saying, take 10 years to find a teacher, but I didn't realize the meaning. Take a long time to find a teacher. And when you find the person you really, really, really trust and connect with, never leave them. That easier said than done, but if possible, that thing. And
I mean that.
don't trust teachers just because they are famous or speak very good or yeah.
I mean that's a. We could do a whole nother conversation just on that subject. I think 'cause there could be a lot to unpack there. But so let me one last question before we wrap up for today. Well, actually, I guess two last questions. But the first one is, besides your own, what's a book that you've gifted most often to either your other students or fellow martial artists? It doesn't have to be a martial arts book, but just something that you thought advanced them on their way.
Wow. That's a very good question. I'll show you. This book.
There we go.
Yeah. Great Disciples of the Buddha, Their Lives, Their Works, Their Legacy. It's fantastic. Have you read this?
I haven't read that particular one, but I have one or two books in that series.
Yeah, and there's a series of the scriptures as well, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's
Theravada. This is fantastic. Yeah. Before I
What
read
is it?
this, I didn't understand really how amazingly accomplished the disciples were, but this is brilliant. Yeah, I recommend this to everybody.
Okay, very cool. So if people are interested in following up with you or they want to follow you, where can they find you?
I have a website. It's lineofintent.com. So I started this company, I guess, 20 years ago to publish books. Lineofintent.com. And the Gmail is the same. So lineofintent@gmail.com. I'll just briefly say before we go that on that website, you can find many. I do a lot of 12-week video and audio courses that people can easily, if they want to see what I teach, the Neigong, the Buddhist practice, the Xingyiquan. I have lots of little courses there, and I have a connection to my YouTube channel on there. So yes, I'm always happy to hear from people.
Okay, great. So we've got your website and a YouTube channel. And I'll make sure that I include links to both of those in both the article and the video description down below for those that are watching on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right, Alex. Well, I enjoyed our conversation very much. I appreciate your time, and let's catch up again. Hopefully next time I'm in the UK, we can meet in person.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I hope you're coming over this year, maybe, or next year.